China gave a briefing on the implementation of China's National Human Rights Action Plan for 2016 to 2020. What have been the highlights? What makes China's plan distinct from others? And the U.S. Senate has advanced another new technology bill aimed at countering China. What sets this one apart from the rest? And in what ways are the two countries competing in tech? Welcome to The Point. Coming to you from Beijing, I'm Wang Guan, sitting in for Liu Xin. China held a press conference on Monday to take a look back at what's been accomplished by its National Human Rights Action Plan, that is from 2016 through 2020, the third and latest such plan. The catalyst for making the plan date back to 1993, when the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action was adopted by the World Conference on Human Rights. What are the highlights of China's human rights development in recent years? How does it fit into what China calls its people-centered approach? Joining me from Memphis, Tennessee is Professor Joseph Mahoney from East China Normal University, and from Beijing, Dr. Dong Yikun from the School of English and International Studies at Beijing Foreign Studies University. Welcome to both of you. Dr. Dong, let me go to you first. More than 60 countries have set national human rights action plans. China did it too. China is one of the 8 countries that have so far made 3 or more plans. First of all, I want to get your thoughts on China's National Human Rights Action Plans.
Yeah, I think the action plan not only demonstrates Chinese government, even the rights of pursuing happiness for everyone in China, and the efforts, I think this is also the demonstration that the efforts by the government and for the people will continue to evolve in anticipation of and in response to our role. So this action plan, when I read it, after reading it, I think the action plan returns to some very basic questions, such as what makes Chinese government accountable for people, and what is the happiness that everyone in China pursues, and why is it this sense of happiness critical to China's prosperity, and how do we spend our energy attention to pursue this cause? So I think this action plan suggests the aspiration which Chinese people have to create a life, though this life is sometimes, that is challenged, but I think this is a life we live that we feel proud of, and a life that we love. So this is I think that is my some thoughts over the action.
Right. Professor Mahoney, China's action plan says it adheres to a people-centered development approach, and the protection of people's rights to live and to prosper are of paramount importance. What do you make of that? What has been your observation when it comes to China's human rights development?
Well, when we talk about human rights in the international context, we generally talk about 2 bases for human rights. One is called positive human rights, and the other is called negative. And in the case of the people-centered development approach, this is more in line with what we call positive rights, in so much as the government is empowered to help people improve their conditions, their lot in life. Whereas negative rights tend to restrict the power of government. They tend to be based, particularly in the West and the United States, they tend to be based on private property rights, individual rights. And while these are valuable and important, they sometimes entrench those who have against those who don't have. So, but I think when we look at this in the broader context over the course of China's development, there are 4 key areas that we can talk about when we talk about China's progress in positive human rights. The first is, of course, the fact that China was able to establish a nation state, to establish Chinese sovereignty, overcoming foreign aggression and preventing more of the same. The second is that China has gone through many iterations of finding the right development path, and in the meantime raising hundreds of millions of people up, leading the country to new sustainable forms of development, and now transitioning to green development. And then I think thirdly, we see, of course, ongoing efforts to close the gaps, those places or those people who have not benefited as much as others, women, minorities, the extreme poor. And we've seen a lot of progress, but still continuing efforts in that area. And then fourth, of course, we have China's efforts to contribute to human rights globally with development schemes like Belt Road Initiative, responding to the pandemic, as well as trying to contribute positively against climate change.
Yeah, thank you for this detailed breakdown. Dr. Dong, let me go back to you. Countries interpret the concept of human rights very differently, obviously. For example, the Netherlands, they have a National Action Plan 2020 for human rights. They emphasize the access to services. Meanwhile, many other countries around the world have challenged China's human rights record and China's human rights definition. How do you think China's human rights action plans and its national human rights strategies responded to these accusations?
I think that the action plan or the approach, the people-centered approach, suggests that the pursuit of the idea happiness was not self-indulgence. So it's like so the pursuit of collective efforts to solve some common issues, challenges. It is a necessary driver of a prosperous society. So we prioritize security issue and also the economic development because I think these are the laid solid foundation for the freedom and also the collective happiness. And so this is, I think, China gave its own definition of basic human rights, and also China they argues that so economic growth would not have been possible without respecting everyone's ability and achievement. So, and without efforts to create a land in which life is better and richer and fuller for everyone. So I think this is a very innovation and also China's interpretation of human rights. And China is sharing this wisdom with the whole world.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure as a scholar, in school through academic and scholar exchanges, you probably have often discussed and debated about the issue of human rights with your foreign friends. And how did you explain to them about what China has done when it comes to human rights and why China interprets the concept of human rights slightly differently than those in the West?
Yeah, my experiences have been that I think that when I talk about the human rights issues or maybe the controversial points between the East and West approaches, I think that we have more similarities or more common grounds than differences when I talk with my colleagues and friends overseas, because I think that the very important thing that for happiness. So we don't actually really try to talk in very formal, serious way. We start with the happiness. So what are the sources of happiness? Of course, for the American dream, which is there is a very popular saying that a big house, big car, and a Big Mac. So it means it has very explicit meaning of economic prosperity for everyone. So I think that is something that Chinese have the agreement and Chinese have, dedicated to achieve. So that is economic development, and everyone have the right to enjoy the positive results of economic prosperity.
Right. Professor Mahoney, Beijing said in 2018 that China has been combining the principle of human rights universality with the reality of modern times and its own national situations, saying that China is committed to going down a path of protecting human rights that fits into the Chinese context. What has been your observation when it comes to this Chinese context?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to remember, and too often we neglect this for a couple of reasons. The first is, but really, time and history. The West has been in the position of modernity for more than a couple hundred years at this point, and China has been in it a lot less time. But where we become confused sometimes is that China has, of course, accelerated its development curve and has achieved so much that we sometimes become confused about their capacity to accelerate all things in perfect ways. Now, what I'm really trying to say here is that China began to really develop and solve some of these problems only in the past 70 to 80 years. And of course, we've seen this really accelerate further in the last 30 to 40 years. But it's dealing with these real issues, these real development issues that other countries have had centuries to deal with. And when we look at other developing countries that achieve liberation or independence roughly the same time China has, they haven't, of course, kept pace with China. So I think that one of the things that we do is we look at how has China been able to raise the standards of living for women, how have they been able to raise people out of extreme poverty. These are the real conditions, the real historical context facing the Chinese people. And this is this very realistic approach, and not we should say, an idealistic approach to human rights, where we have a certain concept of what it means to be free, a certain concept of what it means to be happy, but rather dealing every day in the real dirt of life to raise people up and out of it.
All right, Professor Joseph Mahoney from East China Normal University, and from Beijing, Dr. Dong Yikun from Beijing Foreign Studies University. Thank you both so very much.